in at least in the United States of America, land ownership, real estate, even these are opportunities to build lasting, not just wealth, but economic stability and resilience for oneself and then for one's family. I think of what one of our board members, Ebony Alexander, says. She says, a landless people are a powerless people. And I think that's true. If you don't have a place that you can call your own, a place that you can steward a this physical value that you can pass down, at least again in the American capitalist framework, then it can be really hard to have agency and to build from there. And so, well, I'm not an economist, nor am I an expert on the economy. I do think that
Right.
there is a connection between land ownership and the ability to build a viable economic future for oneself and the people you love.
Welcome to Destination Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Jones, President and CEO of Desiree Jones Co-Agency. This podcast was created to amplify the stories of individuals and organizations who are committed to driving impact, and it serves as a platform where conversations become catalysts for action. Today's episode is deeply personal and profoundly grounding. I'm joined by someone I not only work with, but I also admire. Bethaney Wilkinson, Executive Director of the Sustainable Forestry and African American Land Retention Network, and author of The Diversity Gap. In this conversation, we explore the intersection of spiritual grounding and visionary leadership, the hard work of preserving Black land ownership, and the personal journey that led her to the helm of a national movement. And today, she shares the story behind it all. Oh, welcome to Destination Impact Podcast. Today, our guest is Bethaney Wilkinson. So she is someone who I've had the honor of working with for more than a year now. We just passed our year anniversary, and it's been such a pleasure. Bethaney is the executive director of SFLR Network, and she leads a national effort to help Black and historically underrepresented landowners reclaim their power, preserve generational wealth, and advance equity in rural communities. But what makes Bethaney leadership really truly distinctive and just impressive for me is the way that she brings her whole self to work. Just the conversations that we've had, the way that she approaches leadership, it really impressed me. And I wanted to definitely have her as part of the podcast. Can you take us back to the roots of your journey? Like what called you to do this work, the healing work that you're doing that's affecting people across the board? Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. Yeah. Where to start? Where to start? Well, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor and treat to be able to talk with you in a different capacity than we're normally working in. So this is fun. Thank you. Yeah. When I think of the roots of the work I'm doing now, there are lots of different points that come up for me. I mean, I grew up in rural middle Georgia. My dad is a country boy. He grew up in rural South Georgia and just life in slow, rural, land based communities is something that is really near and dear to his heart. And then being his child, I grew up in the woods, in the creeks, raising animals, helping him with processing the deer after his hunt in the mornings, helping my mom can the food in the summertime. Like this was just our life. And so, many ways, when I think of the work of SFLR now, supporting landowners and really supporting families and understanding the value of their land, it really is tied back to my own upbringing, my own roots, my own experiences in rural Georgia. Professionally, it's just a different journey. I moved away from my small town, moved to the big city, went to school in Atlanta, opened my worldview in a lot of different ways, and became very just generally interested in community development, economic development, social justice, healing racial harm. Like I just became very interested in these things. And that kind of led me on a very unexpected journey. I did not have a traditional career path. I have not had a traditional path in any way, shape, or form. I did go to school, but then I interned at my church for a while. And then I bopped around the Atlanta nonprofit scene. And then I landed in urban farming. So I did urban farming for a few years. And then I was also teaching these racial justice trainings on the side for churches. And I was just kind of all over the place and following the thread of what made me come alive and the problems I wanted to solve. And that landed me working for another Atlanta nonprofit where I stayed for 4 years, which was long for me, and was leading programs for social entrepreneurs. So people who were trying to solve problems in their communities through businesses, through nonprofit ventures. I led events and programming. And in that role, I really learned what it takes to take a social impact venture from an idea to reality. So, how do you build this? How do you make it real? How do you gather people around a vision? How do you tell your story? How do you create remarkable experiences so that you can not only have an impact, but sustain it for the long haul? So, in that particular role, I learned a lot about how to start an organization and how to lead one. And my mentor there was really incredible. And so, following my time at that organization, I had the opportunity to launch this project focused on organizational culture and diversity, helping mostly nonprofits and value driven organizations to ground their value for dignity and racial diversity in something real in their organizational life. So, I led the diversity gap for a couple years. That launched me into some independent consulting work that I did for a couple years. And all of that came together with an opportunity for SFLR. A lot of it has been, again, following what makes me come alive, being aware of the problems I feel called to solve in any given season, and then really relying on a network of incredible people to help me discern when an opportunity is right for me. So we can follow any of those threads, Desiree, because there's a lot in all of those little
There
pieces.
there is, right? I was just thinking like, man, I should have took notes. There was one thing that you said as far as like taking a social venture or a social enterprise and turning it into like a real thing, like taking it from like an idea to reality. Do you feel like your work in helping social entrepreneurs to bring their visions to life impacted the way that you lead at SFLR and how you approach the work at SFLR, and how so?
Yeah, 1000%. All the time. I think back to that training all the time. I would say understanding the need for mental loyalty to one idea, so focusing on something long enough to bring it to fruition is I'm a creative person, so there are lots of ideas I have every single day. And so it takes a lot of discipline for me to say, that's a great idea. Let me put it on my back burner list. Let me focus on what's in front of me most important. So that's one skill that came from that time. I would say learning how to bring learning how to think about things in a way that's different than how other people are thinking about it and tell that story in a way that invites people in is a recurring practice, I think, for social entrepreneurs who want to scale their impact. If you're trying to solve a problem that a lot of people are interested in, and where there's already a lot of ways of talking about that thing, sometimes it can be hard to break through the noise. And so when I look at my work at SFLR, I'm like, okay, here's what we're doing, but how do we do it in a way that's just different enough to invite people into a new story, whether that is through an event we're planning or through a meeting we're hosting, or even with my team. I'm like, how do we do this just a little bit differently? And that's another one of those skills that came from that time. But there's so many, everything from how you lead a meeting to how you ask for money to how do you set boundaries and say no and advocate for what you really want. All of those skills translate from that former season into this one.
That's amazing. I love it. I don't want to dig into SFLR just yet, but I just had to ask
Sure.
a follow-up question. I did want to ask you, like, how has your own spiritual practice influenced the way you lead organizations and even the work that you do on your personal professional side?
Yeah, I mean, it's really everything. After that time of working in that nonprofit helping social entrepreneurs and then launching the Diversity Gap book, podcast, and project, I went through a really painful is probably the best word for it, maybe disorienting also season of burnout. And burnout almost doesn't even feel like it captures it. I was so deeply disoriented, very disconnected from my body, very disconnected from my values, having spent a few years really living at a pace that was unsustainable. It was almost like I've used this metaphor lately. It's like the branches of my ambition that were reaching out, the roots of my life weren't deep enough to sustain the amount of fruit that I was trying to create in that season. And it was very emptying in a painful and challenging way. And so following that time, when all of it came to an end in a way that I didn't love, but was fine in retrospect, I really had to look in the mirror and say, all right, how am I going to show up? Because this is not going to work. Like,
Right.
it's not enough to have a great idea. It's not enough to be really passionate and focused. You really got to take care of yourself. You have to know who you are and what your values are, and you have to be rooted in something more than just your hustle. And so I would say my spiritual practice, one that I've built over the last few years, I mean, it's everything. I'm really committed to moving at the pace of my body. I'm really committed to times of reflection and contemplation and prayer. I'm really committed to being immersed in a spiritual community that nourishes me. And when any of those things get out of whack or out of alignment, I have to take a step back and reorient, because I know that if I'm not rooted in what I value most, in wellness in my body and in wellness in my closest relationships, then all of the quote unquote good things I'm doing in the world won't matter. They won't last. I don't want to change the world and lose myself and my most intimate relationships in the process. So my spiritual practice is a constant returning home to myself so that I can show up to the world in ways that are sustainable.
I love that. I actually just want to spend a little bit of time with that and also maybe even connect the dot. So originally you were talking about when we were talking about helping social entrepreneurs to figure out like how to bring their ideas to fruition, you talked about like your own experience with having like all of these ideas and having to really prioritize and say, okay, let's focus on one at a time. Did that is that one of the issues that led to you feeling like your roots weren't deep enough for the ambition that you were trying to the fruit that you were trying to bear with the ambitious projects that you had taken on? Like, is there any connectivity there?
That's a good question. I think, yeah, I wouldn't say there was so much that I was spread too thin, though maybe I was. I'm not sure. I would say it was just a lot of a lack of self awareness, a lack of awareness of my limits, not just my boundaries, but my limits. Because my project, the diversity gap at least, was focused on such a hot cultural topic, I felt a lot of pressure to perform in a certain way and to not drop the ball. Like, it was a lot of factors that I don't necessarily think were tied to me having too many ideas. I think it was more so just a combination of, again, me not knowing my limits, feeling a lot of pressure, and then also still having another full-time job. And I also got married. It was a lot. It was a
Oh
lot of
my goodness.
life, and I just didn't know how to manage it.
It's funny, there's this book called Take the Stairs. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but it's called Take the Stairs, and one of the things that one of the guiding principles throughout the book is saying, like, do one big thing at a time. Don't do it's like he's like, "If you're gonna pay off your debt this year, that's your goal for the year." Not launch a new business, not to do this, not and so he gave some really practical ways because he's like, the time that it'll take for you to complete that goal is gonna be shorter because you're gonna be focused on it. And then it's gonna allow you to actually complete it as opposed to start and stop and start and stop. And so that makes me think about like just being able to say, okay, one thing at a time, not get married, not get a graduate degree, not get, like, and we do it. It's just like and we don't even think like maybe getting married and getting a graduate degree in the same year might not be the right thing until you're like deep into it. So I think that's really reflective. But as we think about like you had the revelation that you weren't cemented enough to really be able to do all the things and bear all the fruit that you had anticipated. What brought you back to your center? What was it within your spiritual practice, or what was that aha moment where you realized, "Okay, let me come back," and then how did you get there?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't one thing, it was a lot of things. And I think when it comes to the spiritual life, it's always evolving. One big thing was moving to a place that had a slower pace of life. So my husband and I left the city on accident. I mean, we didn't leave on accident. We did not mean to leave the city permanently. That is just what happened with life and COVID and all that stuff. But where we live, it's very slow. It's very beautiful. I feel like I live in a retreat center, and that is very grounding to me. I would say my faith is a really critical aspect of that coming home to center, just being rooted in an ancient spiritual tradition that grounds me in a reality that's bigger than myself has been really critical. I would say pursuing healthy personal relationships has been really healthy, really good for me. I think we live in a time where it's very easy for a lot of our lives and connections to exist online. And I don't want to disparage that. And also, I think that we are wired for connection, in flesh connection with people. And it takes a lot to build and sustain healthy, generative relationships in adulthood. So I think that's been a really big part of my practice of coming home to myself. And then, really practically, I write a lot. So I spend probably too much time in self reflection and journaling. But I just, without that practice to like put my pen to the paper and to make sense of what's going on inside of me, that really helps me with just general self management, managing my emotions, processing my fears, making sense of my anxiety. Sometimes I go see my own spiritual director or my own therapist. Like I have my own counselors in my life, but I find that my creative life, just writing and sometimes writing for the public, but writing for myself is another one of those really grounding practices. So it's not just one thing that brings me back to center, it's all of those things. And it's a dance and it ebbs and flows in seasons, but that's how I find my way home.
I love it. This is so exciting to me. This is such a great conversation. It's giving me all the feels. So the work that you're doing at SFLR is all about African American land ownership. It's about increasing African American representation in forestry. It's about providing resources so that African American land can be passed down for generations and those people can understand the value of the land and how to monetize it in a way that does not is not a burden, and there's several layers to how it becomes that. But there are a lot of African Americans who desire to have had that promise of 40 acres and a mule fulfilled in their life. There's a lot of African Americans that are coming back to the land. There's a lot of us who are like, I need to learn how to grow my own food and things like that. But we didn't have the blessing of being able to grow up in that way and to be able to see our family own land and own livestock and grow their own food, but we feel that desire. Did you ever realize that was a gift that you had growing up?
Mhm. Honestly, I don't think so. I'm listening to you and I understand what you're saying. It's not to say that I don't know that it's a gift. I do
Right.
know that it's a gift. I experienced my parents live a mile and a half down the road from me. I was there yesterday. My mom's prepping for canning season. I'm aware that these things are gifts. I don't know that there was a moment though where I was like, "Oh, this is really distinct or special" in the way that perhaps you're describing it because it was just everyday life. But now that you're saying it, I'm kind of having a moment of awareness right now. I could also add, in conversing with some of my peers, I guess, there is this sense of, yeah, oh, I wish I'd had that. I guess I don't know. I don't know. I yes and no, I guess, but not in a way that really sticks out to me.
And I think that there's like I've found among my peers and people that I'm just in relation with that there's a deep desire to have some of those things that you grew up with, right?
Mhm.
Like there's so many people who are like, I just want to buy me a plot of land and just figure it out, right? Because none of them grew up that way, or none of them actually were taught how to be able to manage living on your own land and building your own home and growing your own food and all of those things that I think are inherent to our ancestry as
Yeah.
Africans. And so that is something that I think, so I think that it is a gift. That is why I'm
Mhm.
asking you that. So I was wondering if you ever, once you start conversing with people and learning more about people who lived outside of the rural areas, did you realize like actually that was a unique experience
Yeah.
and you got the best of both worlds in some ways.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's really interesting. I think a part of I guess maybe sometimes when I hear people say that they wish they had it, it's not that I don't believe them. I do believe them. My other thought is, oh, it's a lot of work. Do you know what you're
No,
signing up for?
absolutely.
And so I think that might be part of why I think I can make sense of like the romanticized version of it, but I'm very
Right.
aware of the non-romantic version. A storm came through. It took out the trees. It took out your fence. Now you're spending the next week with your dad and your brothers
Mhm.
moving logs and putting up the new fence. The cows got out. How are we going to wrangle these cows? The baby's giving birth at 3 a.m. on Christmas morning or around Christmas. We got to be out there in the rain helping this baby goat be born. And then we have to bottle feed it for weeks on end till it can. So I guess when I see the vision, I am not seeing the Pinterest version. I am seeing all of
Absolutely.
the work, the early mornings. And I'm like, this isn't that. I mean, it's good, but it's
Mhm.
hard. And I
Right.
think that's what balances out in my mind.
Absolutely. I definitely see the work that goes into it. I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know if I'm built for that," like, but I do think that if I had learned it from a young age, it wouldn't feel foreign to me. Like, and I would understand the necessity and everything and the benefit. Like, you also get to reap the harvest, you know,
Yes.
after doing all of the sowing and the work that you're doing, right? And I think that
Mhm.
we see the harvest, right? And so that's what looks beautiful to us. But I also think that there is a part that, for my personal experience, there's a part that feels like it's missing. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't know until I got older that my grandfather was a farmer. And my dad told me, both my sister and I were like trying to container garden in the backyard, and we're calling each other like troubleshooting and all of these things. And my dad's like, "Oh, y'all growing stuff?" Oh, my dad we used to have acres of farmland that we no longer have as a family.
Uh-huh.
And he said his dad farmed almost not out of necessity, it was almost like it was just in him to do, right?
Yes.
And it used to frustrate my dad so much because they would do so much work farming, and my grandfather would not monetize it. Like, he would tell the women in the neighborhood or in the community that if they came and picked their own veggies and stuff, that they could just give them a couple bucks. Like, he wasn't real it wasn't because he did it just because that was in him. And so I think that's where my question comes from, is because
Yeah.
I feel like we were kind of cut off from that, and we didn't even realize until we got older that that was like a rich part of our ancestry.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Because even as I think about it now with the land my parents have and how hard my dad worked to acquire that land and to preserve it, me and my siblings are now at a point where we have to determine how do we preserve this legacy so that my nieces and nephews and their children understand what my dad has done to secure this land, this physical land, but then the legacy of life on the land for himself and for his great grandchildren. And so it's something that we do think about in terms of how do we pass this down. We do know it is valuable. And I appreciate you kind of mirroring back to me how special and unique of an experience I've had.
And I appreciate you taking me out of the the romanticizing of it and realizing that it is hard work. No, I have like wild blackberries growing in my backyard, and
Mhm.
I'm just like, I really need to like tend to them because they make me so happy, and I have
Yeah.
no clue of what to do. So I've been like watching YouTube videos. It
Good.
tells you like how far removed I am from actually being like understanding the work that it takes. Like, I have the benefit of them growing wild, but it's really special. It really is.
Mhm.
Um, so I remember you sharing a story with me about when you and your husband were about to buy your first property. I don't know if it was your first, but I remember you saying that your dad encouraged you to try 1 acre as opposed to like a large amount of land. Can you talk through that story? Because I think there's a lesson in it that I'd love to kind of bring to light.
Sure, yeah. So we left the city and our original intention was just to move in with my parents for a minute to save money to go back to the city and buy a house. But then the pandemic happened and we were like, okay, it's kind of nice to live on a farm during a pandemic. There's a lot of space, a lot of fresh air. This is good.
Mhm.
And we started shopping for houses and I hated shopping for houses. I was like, this is horrible. I just didn't like it. I didn't see anything that I liked. I just didn't like the politics. I didn't like it. And my dad kept saying, oh, you can build a house. Well, you can build. And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, you can build one. So eventually we were like, okay, maybe we'll try building one. So we shifted from shopping for houses to shopping for land.
Mhm.
And then it's a matter of figuring out how much land do we need. So we looked at sites that were, I think, maybe up to like 10 acres. Some of them were like raw lands, and by raw land I mean never had a house on them before, forested. And in some ways that would have been great, but we were working on a budget. And so something that was completely raw would have had additional cost to clear, to put in power, all of those things. So in that process, and this was really, I say it was the Lord's provision, that later on in that process, an acre became available at the end of the road where my parents lived on, and a house had burned down tragically, so that part was not great. But the house had burned down and it was just sitting there, and my dad was like, this acre might be available, I can call the guy to see if he'll sell it to you, because my dad knows the people in our community. So he called him, he said, hey, my daughter and son-in-law are looking to build a house. You have this acre here. Would you sell it to them? And he said yes. And in terms of the sizing, my dad's encouragement was, just start small. And if you outgrow that 1 acre, then go get more land. But start with one because you haven't done this before. And that was really good advice. We have this 1 acre here. My husband ended up spending that summer. We bought the land as is. He spent that summer clearing off the old house physically, mostly by himself with some support from my dad and my brothers. So again, the hard work of land stewardship. You gotta you gotta physically remove the things that are there. But
Right.
thankfully this acre, because it had already had a house on it, it already had a septic tank, already had a well, already had a driveway, which saved us probably $20,000 honestly on the front end. And we were able to build on this acre. And an acre is enough for us right now. We could not grow on this whole acre if we wanted to. Like, it's just so much space. And so while we might one day, we dream too about land, about having our grand house in the mountains somewhere, but 1 acre is plenty for right now, and it's serving us well.
It really is exciting, and it also is a lesson to me because I think oftentimes I have to go back to our 40 acres and a mule. Everybody is like thinking, my dad even says, if I were to buy land, at this age, I want to own the land as far as my eye can see. And I'm like, "That sounds amazing, but it also sounds like a lot of work, like a lot
Yeah.
to maintain that you may not even use, initially, especially as you're getting older." And, I lived on, like, when I lived, even it was in the city, and I lived on like a 3/4 of an acre, in a small little house, and it was huge. I couldn't imagine I couldn't imagine having to cut the yard for a much larger space and maintain it and everything like that. So, I think the lesson there, just for a lot of people who are listening and who are thinking about our conversation, the desire to own their own piece of land, to be able to build something from the ground up, to have the space to be able to grow their own food if they should desire. I love your dad's advice. Start small with 1 acre. It's a great amount of land for 1 or 2 people to manage, but also when you're ready to grow, you can. And once
Hmm.
you've stewarded that acre, you have a better understanding of how to steward 10 acres.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, I even think about something as simple as just mowing, like you were saying, just mowing what's there, what's growing. My parents also own they have a separate plot, a 10-acre plot, a town over that has a big pond on it, and it's just amazing. My dad loves to fish, and he likes to take his grandkids fishing, so that's why he has the pond. But yeah, just it's just there, and it just keeps growing because nature does its thing. And if no one goes out there and cuts it back and trims it and manicures it, it's just going to keep growing. And that's your responsibility now if you choose to buy those 10 acres. And so at one point, my husband and I thought about buying that from my dad. And he's like, I don't have time to take care of our acre and that 10 acres. And I was like, that makes sense. Yeah.
It's true, I understand.
Yeah. I got you. I got you.
No, but that's wonderful. I mean, that's really sweet, just your dad having, so he doesn't live on the 10 acres, but he does go and fish at the pond and things like that. That's really amazing. The one thing that I think about is how it's oftentimes when you're in a lived experience, you don't recognize, like, all the things that are happening, good and bad, that are leading you to one moment. Would you say that a lot of your personal and professional experiences led you to the moment of becoming the executive director of SFLR? Like, do you think that there were a lot of things that happened prior to that moment that made that the perfect opportunity for you?
Yeah, I'd say so. As I was doing my independent consulting work, I reached, and I'd never done this before. I'd always worked in a nonprofit on a team. Even as I was doing lots of stuff, I always had a team with me. And so as an independent consultant, you're by yourself a lot. You aren't working with a team often. You're dropping into an organization, then you're leaving after a season of time. And I just started to feel like, okay, not only I'm a little bored with this, but I want to be a part of something that is more that where the impact extends beyond just what I'm able to do in a 6-month engagement or whatever it might be. And I started to think, okay, well, what do I want to do next? And I literally told myself, well, whatever is next, I want to be an executive director. And I just knew that. I knew that long before I knew SFLR. I was like, I think that's my next move, because as an executive director, I'd get to lead at a higher capacity than I ever have before. And I want to see how I do. Like, I want to see what it feels like to have that responsibility. It's a variety of problems you have to solve as a leader. You're managing people, you're raising money, you're determining program strategy. And I like the variety that works for my personality. And then by the time SFLR crossed my desk as an opportunity, it made sense in a lot of ways, because not only is it a nonprofit or an emerging nonprofit, it is a startup with a legacy. So I'm like, oh, that's fun for me. I'm not much of a maintainer. I'm more of a like, give me a problem to solve. I'll get in there, I'll solve the problem, and then I'll pass it off to someone else. So it's cool to see that. It was cool to see that SFLR was at this point of transition. I'm like, I can work with that. And then, of course, the people we serve was very personal to me, just being, a Black person who comes from a family of Black forest landowners. So there are all of these points of intersection that were really special, and I couldn't have planned it if I tried.
So, how did you learn about the opportunity and take leadership at SFLR?
Yeah, so one of the partners that I'd been consulting with is the same organization that incubated SFLR as a program. So I was doing consulting with them, supporting them on some of their internal organizational culture and diversity things, programs. And they told me about SFLR actually at the beginning of that engagement. But then towards the end of my engagement with them, they were like, oh, SFLR is becoming a nonprofit. They voted to become a nonprofit. They'll be hiring an executive director. And so it was just through conversation, participating in this forestry event, that I learned about the opportunity. And then I took it home and talked to my people and prayed about it. And I ended up applying. And then the rest is, it was like a 6-month application process, but then I applied. Yeah.
Okay. So when you learned about SFLR, and just, I don't think that I've said, it's the Sustainable Forestry and African American Land Retention Network. And so can you tell us a little bit more about the organization and how it got started? Because you're kind of at a unique intersection where they're ready to become a nonprofit, but how did it get started and out of what necessity was it started?
SFLR Network was created as a program of the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities in 2013. And the real need that they were seeing was for forestry technical assistance, specifically for Black forest landowners throughout the Southeast, who, due to a history of discrimination from USDA and other forest federal agencies, and due to just a lack of access and timely information about forest management, Black land was being lost at a very high rate. I don't have all the statistics and top of mind. I know that Desiree, you might be able to pull them
Oh yeah,
together.
I
You
can
got
drop
them.
some. I can drop some, and then, but
Mm-hmm.
there were. I think at one point, I think it was in 1910, Black people owned about 15 million acres of land, and now it's like less than 1%. And so I think when we think about the discrimination in the application processes for the USDA, in the Pickford laws, there was a history of documented discrimination of for African American landowners, we've talked about this in other spaces, but I think definitely there's data to support the work.
Yes, absolutely. And so the SFLR network was created to help address that. So the theory of change being, well, if we are able to support organizations on the ground by providing them the forestry expertise, the legal support, and the outreach and education to begin managing their forest land, can we move the needle on this? Can we see more African American land held in families? Can we see more legacy secured? Can we see more sustainable forest management? Can we see more wildlife habitats protected? Can we see more conservation? Like, if we provide a model of support for this specific constituency of landowners, then what can happen over time? And so it started with two organizations in 2013, and now we're up to seven, hoping to expand up to 10 over the next 2 years, across the Southeast, deploying these direct services on the ground to landowners to help them understand their land, to understand the asset that they have, and to preserve their legacies for the long haul. So that's how it got started, and it's grown over the years. And I'll add that at the end of their 10th year of existing, the directors, the leaders of the network decided that they wanted to transition from being a program into being a standalone organization. And so that is when they opened up the opportunity for an executive director to step in to help facilitate that transition from program to nonprofit. And that's why I was hired, and that's been the bulk of my role.
Okay, that's amazing. What are the benefits of this transition?
Well, they give the network more autonomy, more flexibility, more, I don't want to say independence because I don't think it's independence. It's more interdependence and the ability to represent African American landowners at a regional scale with, again, with some autonomy and with a distinct and specific voice. It gives us more flexibility. It gives us perhaps even ownership in a way of our work and of our mission and of how we tell our story. It just, I think that moving towards that growth towards autonomy, I think, is just healthy. It's just the process of maturity for the organization. And I think that there are many benefits to that.
As we think about the economic disparities that we see in our country, how would you connect the disparities in African American land ownership with the economic disparities that we see now among African Americans?
Mm, that's a great question. I mean, I want to say that when I think of, in at least in the United States of America, land ownership, real estate, even these are opportunities to build lasting, not just wealth, but economic stability and resilience for oneself and then for one's family. I think of what one of our board members, Ebony Alexander, says. She says, "A landless people are a powerless people," and I think that's true. If you don't have a place that you can call your own, a place that you can steward, a this physical value that you can pass down, at least again in the American capitalist framework, then it can be really hard to have agency and to build from there. And so, while I'm not an economist, nor am I an expert on the economy, I do think that
And
there is a connection between land ownership and the ability to build a viable economic future for oneself and the people you love.
yeah, and I think a lot of it does also tie back into generational wealth, right? The ability to own land and pass down land for generations creates the opportunity for the next generation to have a certain amount of wealth that they may not have had otherwise. And
Hmm.
so the work that you're doing at SFLR directly addresses the ability to establish in increase generational wealth for African American families.
Hmm.
But when we think about the human part of it, which is the actual landowners that you've got to speak to and hear their stories and really learn from, and even in your conversations in the podcast, how has that changed your perspective about the work that you're doing?
How so? What do you mean?
I'm asking, has it changed your perspective in any way? Like just being
Mm.
able to actually connect with the people and hear their stories. I'm sure you're already dedicated to the work. It's not to make you more dedicated, but has it changed your perspective of like the necessity of the work?
I don't know that it's changed it. It's given me more context for what it takes to see change happen. I would
Mhm.
say more than anything. Many of the landowners in our community, they're older. They are trying to figure out how to get their children and grandchildren interested in land stewardship, which is tricky. Like any of us, they are just living their lives and having to make decisions about this valuable asset that they have. And so, if anything, it's just deepened my understanding of the complexity of the questions that are facing our landowners, and it has helped me to understand the amount of time it takes to see a landowner get from point A to point B. So I don't know that it's changed my worldview in a drastic way. It's just more been like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to need more time and we're going to need more resources and we're going to need to deploy more people to help landowners understand what they value and how to make progress in managing their land.
What came to mind is our campaign and our campaign title. And I know it took a while for us to get there, just like going through like, what do we want to drive home and what message do we want to drive home? And what you said really speaks to roots to resilience, which has been the SFLR campaign that we launched with the rebrand, which we've seen come out in multiple ways, including the most recent summit, the podcast, the Roots to Resilience podcast. The roots are not just enough, right? You have to have the resilience to watch everything grow. And I think that's what we're seeing now with the aging population of land ownership is okay, now we know that some of these people have been devoted and dedicated to preserving the land and maintaining the land. But how do we take that concept and that responsibility and how do we impress upon the next generation the importance of it? And I think we are doing our work as SFLR to be able to do that. But personally, what do you feel is the thing that young people listening to this episode or people who know that they have land in their family, that their aunts and uncles are maintaining or their grandparents are maintaining, what do you feel that they need to know to impress upon them the importance of them also taking responsibility in that land?
Yeah, two things come to mind. The first is the importance of being outside and being on land. And I know that might sound really simple, but
Mhm.
it's much easier to perceive the value of land if your life is immersed in it in some way. And so being proactive about being out there, getting your kids out there, if it is land that you own or that is in your family, then creating memories and experiences. Go play hide and seek. It doesn't have to be fancy. Grill out. There might not be electricity. Get a generator. Take it out there. Put up a tent. Don't go to a park for a reunion. Go to the family land for the reunion. So finding ways to tie your memories and the memories of the children in your family to that place is really important. But I'll also say, as a person now, my parents worked hard to get the land that they have. Now it's up to me and my siblings as that next generation. We actually are the ones who have to do the work, the legwork to preserve it. So that is figuring out the right legal structure. That is having hard conversations with one another as a group of siblings about what the value of this land is. Are we aligned in what this means for our family? What is the succession plan here? And it's not sexy work. It's hard. It can be expensive if you want to bring in legal support, which you have to at some point in time. I guess what I'm trying to communicate is that it's up to us to do it. Like, there is no one who's going to come protect your family land for you. Like, if you're listening to this and you're interested, you've got to go figure it out. And it's not easy, but if you don't do it, no one will. And so, how do you set things up in such a way that your children or your nieces and your nephews or your great nieces and your great nephews or your great grandchildren, so that future generations aren't sitting around thinking like many of us are today, like, oh man, did we have family land? Like, we have to solve that problem so that the generations coming after us don't have to solve it. They can face new problems. But I guess this is very present for me right now because me and my siblings are in the midst of figuring this out. And so I'm just realizing, oh, if I don't do this, it's not going to happen. No one's doing this for me, and we've got to figure it out.
Right, and you and your siblings probably have an advantage just because of your parents' knowledge of maintaining and preserving the land, but then also your own knowledge as the executive director of SFLR. But for people who don't have that, for people, and I think one thing you mentioned was actually being on the land and experiencing that it is a living, breathing thing that belongs to you and your family. There are a lot of people who live in the East Coast. There are a lot of people who live in other parts of the country who've never stepped foot on their land. I know some of the organizations within the network have made it a mission to be able to bring people back to the land. Why do you think that's so important?
I mean, you have to see it and feel it. I mean, I'm thinking about the regional partner summit that we just concluded, and folks can find those videos online thanks to Desiree's team. But one of the landowners, Mr. Bowler, talks about, he tells this story, and I'm not going to try to retell the story, but he talks about the moment his dad had him as a boy pick up the clay, pick up the dirt, and say, "This is yours. This is yours. It belongs to you." And that just kind of changes things. It's like, oh my goodness. And even if it takes you many years for that, for it to make sense, if it's new, it's just an incredible step in the process of connecting those dots of personal investment and value. And so I think that's why when you go back to the land and you see it with your own eyes, even if you don't know what to do with it, know that it's valuable and know that a future is possible for that place. And if you take care of it, it takes care of you, which is to quote Miss Ebony Alexander, our board member again.
Right. So many gems were dropped during
I
that
know.
summit. So definitely go back and check that out on YouTube, and we'll post those links as well. But Bethany, I do want to conclude with a little bit more about your upcoming book, but I just wanted to make one final message about SFLR, which is for those people who aren't aware of what to do with the land that they've either inherited or they've been paying the taxes on or whatever that might be. How can SFLR help?
Yeah. So if you are, we can help in a variety of ways. If you are in one of our partner states, so that's Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, or Arkansas, then we do have sites within each state that are really dialed into the support that you would need. And so you can reach out to any of those sites through our sflrnetwork.org website. That's the hands-on support we can often provide, not always because you can't fix every problem, but we can often provide in those 7 states. If you're outside of those states, we are always doing our best to share content and resources, newsletters, the new podcast that just came out. We're always sharing more information. We have seminars and workshops, and so we're always trying to think through ways to help people figure out what to do with what's been entrusted to them. And we're always looking for new ideas for ways to provide that support. So even if you have a problem and we can't clearly solve it today, we still ask that you reach out to us, because if we hear from 20 people about that same problem, then that gives us an incentive to figure out, okay, how can we meet this need? And so I would say reach out to our network sites if you're trying to find your way, or just reach out to us generally as a team. Join our newsletter so that you can be in the loop for upcoming workshops and seminars, and just start to get plugged in, and we'll see what we can do together.
I love that. So, Bethany, if I can get I know we're right at time, but do you have a couple more minutes so that we could talk a little bit about your upcoming book?
Sure. Yeah,
So, was The Diversity Gap your first book?
it was. Yes.
Okay. So, The Diversity Gap is all about closing the distance between our values and our outcomes, right? And so, in your next book, can you tell us a little bit about it? Give us the title, what it's about, and
Sure.
what you're hoping to achieve by that release.
Yeah, so my next book is very, very different than the first one, just because it was written from a very different place of self-awareness per our earlier conversation. But it's called A More Beautiful Way to Live: 9 Practices to Unlearn Habits of Anxiety, Fear, and Urgency. And in the book, I tell the story of my experience of burnout and then recovery. And I break down the 9 practices that were healing for me in my own journey of coming home to myself, of learning how to tend to my inner life, and of learning how to, per the metaphor from earlier, learning how to grow my roots deep enough, so that my ambitions could actually flourish in a way that's healthy and sustainable. So that's the arc of the book. It comes out in March of 2026, so we've got a long runway. But I'm really proud of it. It's interesting. Sometimes I'm proud of my first book too. I am. The Diversity Gap, or Good Intentions Meet True Cultural Change. And in some ways, it feels a little bit like a first pancake. Not one that you would toss because it was still valuable, but just very different because I didn't know myself as well as I know myself now. And I guess if you talk to any artist who makes anything, their first is going to be very different than what they create many years down the road. So I'm still struggling with that. But I'm really proud of A More Beautiful Way. And it's really written for anybody who feels like they're on the hamster wheel of trying to change the world, and they feel like they're losing themselves, they're losing their mooring, they're losing access to that inner compass in the process. It's like this book is a pathway home.
That's wonderful. I cannot wait. I am praying that Bethany calls me and says, Desiree, I'm getting a few people together to read this ahead of time. And we're going to talk about it before it goes to print. No, but I would love, 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 love to read it. I've already gotten the chance to see the cover. Sorry.
Mm, thanks for helping me with that.
No, and I'm really excited for you, Bethany. But I did want to just close our conversation just reminding you what a gift you are, because this podcast is all about talking to, of course, our clients that we're doing work with so that we can talk about the work that we believe is impactful because we are all on the same mission to do work that we believe can change the world. But also to talk to individuals who we believe are doing amazing work and have devoted their careers and their professional lives to doing that type of work. And it isn't always easy, but we do believe in giving those people a platform and a voice so that they can have a broader impact and their work can also be elevated in the process. So that is why you're here, Miss Bethany. And thank you for being who you are. And I know that this is only you're only scratching the surface because we never talk about your age, but I can tell by that baby face
Oh my goodness.
that you are just getting started. And I'm just happy to be in partnership with you. I'm happy that you've entrusted the baby of SFLR network and the changes that you're making with our agency. It's been such a pleasure, and it really has aligned us in our pathway of continuing to do social impact work that we believe can change the world. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Desiree. It's been a pleasure. Love it. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And tell, what do you want people to know? Where do you want them to find you? We will definitely share SFLR networks information, but also what about Bethany?
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah. So all about SFLR, you can find me there. And then I also write on Substack. A More Beautiful Way is my Substack where I write about themes of nourishing your inner life so that you can sustain all the good work that you set out to do.
Love it. And your pre-orders will begin in June?
Late June, that's what my publisher says. So we'll be sure, I
Okay.
guess, to share the link if it's available.
Exactly. So we'll be helping to promote because we certainly support your work and everything that you're doing. So thanks for joining us, Bethany. We're so grateful to have you.
Thank you, Desiree.